What's up guys, welcome to the third episode of the garage vlog. Today we're actually not gonna be picking up the K5's new painted frame, wheels, subframe, tank and all that stuff. My friend has some issues with the time frame of the whole paint process, so today we're gonna improvise a little bit. I'm gonna wash up all the fairings once again, then I'm gonna wrap them up in some bubble wrap and put them up on the second floor. After that, we're gonna take a look at the engine. We're gonna go over it. We're gonna clean the carburetors, check the valves, and do some proper maintenance work on it, just to see that it's all good to go. It's supposed to be running, but you never know. So I'm gonna do all the necessary steps before we put it back in the frame again. Clean up a little bit better, that one too. So I put up a poll on my Instagram account asking you guys if you wanted to see valve clearance check or a carburetor cleaning process in this episode, and 65% voted for valve clearance and 35% voted for the carb cleaning. If you voted for the carb cleaning, don't worry, that will be featured in a future episode, but today I'm gonna show you guys how to check the valve clearance on this engine. I don't think that this engine will have any problems. These are very reliable engines, but you never know. So, when do you want to check the valve clearance? First of all, you have to go and check the service manual. Different manufacturers, different models require different intervals for the check and adjustment. Usually, they are around about 20,000 to 50,000 miles. That's about 15,000 and 30,000 kilometers. And also, if you start hearing like rattling noises, poor engine performance, the bike hard to start, like cold starts, that's when you gotta start checking if the valves are aligned properly. Let's start with this vlog today, where I'm gonna wash up all the fairings, wrap them up, gonna do a quick time lapse of that, and then we will move on to the engine behind me here. So here we have the engine. It's on the workbench. Much better than working on it in the frame, but if you have it in the frame, it's much better to work with it in the frame, if you know what I mean. But yeah, here we can get a better overview of the whole engine. We can spin it around much easier. This is gonna be optimal for doing all kinds of work on this engine. There's checking the clutch, turning it upside down to take out the gearbox. Like I said, if you have the engine in the frame, you can do this valve clearance check and adjustment with it in the frame. So what we're going to be using today is the spanner wrench, an extensioner, 17mm socket, 10mm socket, and a 12 and 13mm socket. Why I've chose the 12 and the 13 is because when I open up the see-through hole here on the crankshaft, I don't actually know if it's a 12 or 13-inch bolt that's on the crankshaft, so we can turn it around. Here's the feeler gauge that I showed you earlier with all the feeler blades, and also a razor so we can remove some old gaskets, silicone from these lobes, quarter pipe, half pipes, whatever you're gonna call it. I'm a snowboarder, so I'm gonna call those half pipes, but it's probably something that's called something with lobes. When you do the valve check adjustment, you always need to replace this gasket. It's actually pretty cheap. You can get it for around 20 bucks on eBay. The OEM gaskets are about 60 bucks, but it will work anyway. You'll also only need to put silicone here in the lobes. not all the way around the whole valve cover. So looking up here, we have 6 bolts. That's keeping the valve cover onto the head of the engine. So we're gonna remove those quickly, and then we can expose the camshafts, the lobes, and the valve shims underneath here. So now we have exposed the camshafts here. We've taken off the valve cover, put it over here, and all the valve cover bolts and the crankshaft bolt. So you have the crankshaft nut over here that you can turn around the engine. You should only spin it around clockwise, never the other way around. So if you miss the mark when you're turning it clockwise, never turn it counterclockwise, always clockwise. And before I show you the camshafts, down here you have a small notch in the engine block or in the casing here. There's a small notch here that's gonna line up with a special mark here on the crankshaft. And when a specific mark on the crankshaft is aligned with the notch here in the casing, the camshaft, either the intake or the exhaust, should be aligned here. As you can see, the intake marking is here and here. I'm not going to go into depth on all the steps, as I said, because the video will be too long, but when you have aligned it with the notch here, the piston 1 or 4 or 2 and 3 will be on top dead center. That's when the pistons are at the highest point and the valves are shut. That's when you're gonna start measuring the valve clearance. You can't check all the valves at the same time. You can only check 2 cylinders at each time, for the intake and for the exhaust, for example. Or sometimes you have to turn it around a little bit more, and then you can check 2 exhaust ports and spin it one more time, and then you can check 2 other intake ports and 2 other exhaust ports, and then you're finished. One more thing that's important to have is a notepad or a whiteboard. We're gonna go with the OG notepad today. We're gonna spec everything up here, so take a marker and write up in for intake, EX for exhaust, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Since this is a 16 valve, you're gonna have 8 on each side, and each one is gonna have a specific number. So just write them up like that. So now I'm trying to find the valve clearance tab, and it's right here. I don't know if you can see this, but it says valve clearance here. Intake 0.13 to 0.19, and that's 5/1000 of an inch to 7/1000 of an inch, and the exhaust is 0.19 millimeters to 0.25 millimeter, and that's 7/1000 of an inch to 10/1000 of an inch. So let's put that up here. 0.13 to 0.19 millimeters and 0.19 to 0.25 millimeters. Let's put that away. So now I'm going to be taking out my feeler gauge here, and I can see that I have 10, 15, and 20, and 26. So I won't be able to measure exactly 0.13 or 0.19, but this will end up at about 0.10 to 0.15, somewhere around there. It will be totally fine. Same with this exhaust. I'm gonna put it on 0.2 to 25, but it's all about the feeling when you put the feeler gauge in between the cam lobe and the shims. So let's go over here and start turning the crankshaft around to the correct position. So when we start with this one, we're gonna have to check the third and first intake valves. Then we're gonna turn the crankshaft 180 degrees. Then we can check the number 2 and number 4 exhaust valve. Turn the crankshaft another 180 degrees, line them up, check number 2 and number 4 on the intake valve. Then for the last procedure, we're gonna turn it around 180 degrees again, check the first and the third exhaust valve. And once we've done that, I'm gonna write down all the specs and then evaluate how the engine's feeling on the valves. I'm gonna show you more into depth on the first valve check here on the number 1 and number 3, and then I'm gonna speed up with a time lapse on the other parts, and we will evaluate once we're done. 180 and 360. So now they are flush with the cylinder head and aligned down here. So now we can take out the feeler gauge. The 10 to 15 to start with on the third and first intake valves. So we're gonna test on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th valve. And as you can see here, I can't push through on the 0.15. The resistance is too high. You don't want to force anything. I'm gonna fill the 5th. Same thing there. Same thing on the first. So now we're gonna take out the 0.1. This slides through very gently. So the 0.15 has a lot of resistance and won't go through, and the 0.10 slides through pretty easily. So I would actually place this clearance at 0.13. So I'm gonna pass the first, the third, the 5th, and the 6th. Point 13. And now to measure the 2nd and 4th exhaust valve, we're gonna have to turn the crankshaft around 180 degrees. So just find a spot where it slots in over here. Just turn it around 180. So the 4th is over here, and second over here. So you always need to picture the cylinders sitting on the bike. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Once that one's aligned, we can start checking the second and fourth exhaust valve. I'm gonna be starting on 0.2 millimeter or 0.008 of an inch. Get down here. It's going through, but with a slight resistance. I'm gonna try the fourth. That one is completely jammed. I'm gonna switch up to the 0.15. Much better. And the second exhaust valve, much better. So I would guess that these are probably around 0.17, which is out of spec. So yeah, now we have the final specs on the first and the third intake, second and fourth exhaust. So now we're gonna speed up things a little bit and start going over all the valves, but not in detail. Here's the final verdict on the valve clearance check that we just did. And as you can see here, the intake are all inside the manufacturer's specifications tolerance, and the exhaust is out by just 0.02 millimeters on the exhaust side. Every single shim needs to be replaced here on the exhaust side, since they are out of spec. Everyone are, since I don't have 0.16, 0.17, 0.18, I'm going for a in-between feeling of 15 and 20, so it's 17, because 20 is, you can force the 20 in, and the 15 is very light, so somewhere around there. Same thing goes with the intake. The intake is all inside the specs. You actually don't need to worry about having exactly 0.13 and this one's saying 0.13. Don't swap the shims out. Keep it, ride the bike. If it's behaving weird or anything like that, check that again. But if you get these numbers on all valves, you shouldn't be worried, and it should be going for another 20,000 miles or 15,000 kilometers, no worries. But I need to replace these shims. I don't have anyone at home, so I'm gonna have to take this in the future. I'm gonna order home a kit of shims, also new gasket for the valve cover. I just put it on so we don't get dust or anything other in here. So I haven't torqued up the bolts or the spark plugs. Yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, remove the spark plugs. That will set off the compression and make the crankshaft much easier to turn around. That's it for this episode. That was a quick tutorial on how to do the valve clearance check. I don't want to do a full tutorial because I want to keep these vlogs short, and also because all valve clearance check and adjustments are model specific. I just want to show you the basics and get you guys an overview on how the engine looks like beneath the valve cover, how to spin the engine around, how to check the marks and align them properly on the camshafts. So hopefully you learned something today, and probably we won't be too scared to try this one on your own. For next episode, we're gonna go and pick up the turbo bike's frame, wheels and all that stuff. He just sent me pictures of the powder coated frame. Looks super mint. Can't wait to show you guys that. And in the meantime, what do you want to see? Let me know in the comments. Do you want to see more of the Fireblade or do you want to see more of the turbo bike? I know 95% will say the turbo bike, but yeah, if you're into Fireblades or older sport bikes, please let me know. Otherwise, that's it for today. Have a good one. Peace. Oh, and I almost forgot. Please subscribe to this channel, On Roaders. Like the video, comment, and share the video if you enjoyed it more than pineapple on a pizza. Yeah, see you guys next week.